Is this the car the latest Subaru WRX should have been from the start? Subaru has combined the best bits this platform has to offer. The stickiest tyres, the biggest brakes, and the best suspension. With this notchy 6-speed manual transmission, and this awesome SCI style wing on the back. In this video, I'm going to show you everything special with this version of the WRX, take you through the cabin to show you what it's like to live with day to day. Of course, hit the road to find out what it's like to drive. The TS Spec B sits at the top of the Subaru WRX sedan range, priced from $61,490 before on-road costs. It's the most expensive manual WRX ever sold in Australia without an SCI badge. It's the same price as the WRX TS automatic sedan, and it deletes that model's electric sunroof and power passenger seat, but in its place it gains larger 19-inch wheels, upgraded Brembo brakes, a rear spoiler, and the no-cost option of STI performance mufflers, which are fitted to this test car, normally a $2,682 option. As with the automatic TS, you get adaptive suspension as well as a drive mode selector. So, what's new on the outside for this TS Spec B? Well, starting with what hasn't changed with this car is the body panel and the body shell of this WRX. That means you still get these very controversial black plastic wheel arch flares, which obviously not everyone's like. They caused a lot of controversy when this car came out a couple of years ago. I've got to say I'm getting used to them over time. They do look better in certain colors especially. Not necessarily with this blue, but a darker blue, definitely they do look a little bit less noticeable on this car. What do you think of the design? Let us know in the comments down below. Now, as for what is new for this Spec B, starting off with the wheels. New 19-inch wheels, shared with the Club Spec edition that was on sale last year as a very limited run model. 19 inches with new Bridgestone Potenza S007 performance tyres, as well as new brakes behind them. Brembo brakes front and rear, 6-piston front, 2-piston rear with bigger discs as well for better stopping power. But probably the biggest change for the Spec B is at the back, that SCI style tall rear spoiler. Versions of this car sold in other markets don't get it. Aussie cars do. It's sort of a bit of a nod to the heritage of this car, I suppose. It isn't a full STI, but it does a bit of an impression of one. I quite like it, but let us know what you think and whether it's sacrilege to be on a normal WRX in the comments down below. At nearly $70,000 drive away, this WRX is in a bit of a different price league to lower models in the range, and it's up against some pretty strong competition. Other cars you might be looking at include a Toyota GR Corolla manual hatch, priced from $67,990 plus on-road costs, as well as something like a BYD Seal Performance electric car at $61,990 plus on-roads. For more details on standard spec, head to Drive.com.au to read the full review, while for thousands of new and used cars across Australia, from Subaru WRXs to other models that you might be looking at in this segment, head to Drive Marketplace now. There's plenty I like about the cabin of this WRX, but also some things that definitely could be improved for what is a nearly $70,000 car drive away by the time you get this car in the traffic. Interior features include an 11.6-inch touchscreen with wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, a 12.3-inch digital instrument cluster, heated front and outboard rear seats, a power adjustable driver's seat, dual zone climate control, keyless entry and start, a leather steering wheel, a 10-speaker Harman Kardon stereo, and ultra suede and leather look upholstery. The fundamentals are pretty good. I like the steering wheel, quite a nice size, quite small actually. The buttons are a bit of a mess. You got to really get used to those over time, but it does the job well. Good amount of adjustment in terms of tilt and reach, and yeah, no really complaints in that respect. The driving position is pretty good. Could be a bit lower perhaps for some tastes. Wish the seat went a little bit lower, but that means you've got good visibility at the front and the back, even with that tall wing, which doesn't really get in your way too much, because obviously it is as big as it is. These seats, though, are definitely a highlight of this car. Recaro sport buckets, with ultra suede upholstery on them, in sort of on the bits you touch, with a bit of leather on the outer sections of them as well, and some cool STI branding in the headrests. Super comfy, super supportive as well on sporty drives. And you get 8-way power adjustment on the driver's side, as well as 4-way manual adjustment on the passenger side. The lack of power adjustment for the passenger seat is something you miss compared to an automatic TS variant of the WRX, as well as a sunroof. This car doesn't have it, you do get that in an auto. But still, the car is well equipped and you don't miss too much in terms of equipment. Taking center stage on this dash is this touchscreen. Now, it looks pretty good at a glance, and it is pretty bright, and obviously is well featured, as I mentioned a moment ago, but it's just not very quick to respond. You can see it's quite laggy. It's quite a long load time between menus. It's just not that responsive. Even when this car came out back in 2022, this was behind the pace, and it's really feeling quite old these days in 2025. But most of the time, you just run an Apple CarPlay, and it does the job pretty well. We have had some stutters with it though, some times where CarPlay will freeze up and sort of hold for 20 seconds and then suddenly rush through its menus. Yeah, not great, and definitely could be improved as you can see, yeah, not fantastic for the touchscreen there. New for MY25 in the WRX is this instrument cluster, 12.3 inches, as I mentioned before, fully digital. It looks pretty good. You've got a number of different modes you can customize in terms of the way it looks. I've been driving with it set up on these sort of old school dials there as well. Got a bit of customization in terms of the graphics in the bottom left corner, but not a whole lot. You can't really do too much with it, though you can show a full screen map. And if you set your phone up right, you can even show things like ways that you can't often show on the instrument cluster of a car like this. In terms of materials and things, you've got some nice ultra suede on the dash here to sort of match those seats I mentioned before. Soft touch in places like the tops of the doors as well as the tops of the dash, and some sort of leather-like covering down here, but it is pretty hard and scratchy around the place. But again, I don't mind too much about that. In terms of storage, there isn't a whole lot of it. You do have a glove box over here, and it's a decent size, but center console storage is pretty limited. You've got sort of 2 cup holders here, sort of where the key lies most of the time. The space here ahead of the shifter, which is where your phone normally sits, but your center console box is, well, pretty pithy. And there is actually a CD player in there, which is something you don't often see in a new car, for good reason, but still interesting to see it inside the WRX. There's no wireless phone charger or anything to speak of, so you have to really plug in your phone most of the time, even though CarPlay is actually wireless. But there is a good spot for there, so I'm not too worried about that. Door bins are an okay size, and they do have some flock lining in them, which is nice. And yeah, overall, it gets the basics right of this cabin. Good shifter position, good pedals, good steering wheel, good seats. Things like the storage, the infotainment definitely can be improved. Space in the back of the WRX is pretty good for a car of this size. I'm 186 centimeters tall, or 6'1". You can see I do have a fair amount of knee room here. I do sit a bit closer to the steering wheel than some others at my height might, but it's okay in that respect. Decent toe room as well, though headroom is pretty limited. Yeah, my head's hitting the roof there for someone of my height, especially in the middle seat as well. It's even squeezier there as well, but comfort is generally pretty good. Decent other thigh support, decent angle to the backrest as well, and amenities are pretty well catered for. You've got heated outboard rear seats, 2 USB ports down there, map pockets on the back and front seats, and things like, you know, door pockets, as well as a fold down center armrest with a pair of cup holders there. No air vents of any sort back here, but I suppose that's one of the compromises you have to make with a car of this type, especially with a manual handbrake back there that does eat up a little bit of space in this car. But overall, it's okay in the back, not standout, probably good enough for what this car needs to do. Now, in the boot, the WRX is a pretty decent load space for a car of this size. Obviously, it is a sedan, so you have to work with what that means for practicality. Quite a narrow aperture, as well as quite a deep load area as well. I think it's probably big enough for what buyers will need in this segment. Under the floor, there's a bit of foam as well as a temporary spare wheel, which is nice, something you don't often see in performance cars, especially with big tyres like this one here. Shutting the boot lid doesn't always close. Gotta give it a proper slam to close, which does get a bit annoying, but you get used to it after a while. What hasn't changed for the Spec B is the engine. Still a 2.4 litre turbocharged 4-cylinder boxer engine. So that means the cylinders are horizontally opposed rather than going up and down, let's say like an inline four in pretty much every one of this car's rivals. 202 kilowatts is the power output in this car, 350 newton meters of torque, which look, is on the low side for this segment these days. A Golf R is 245 kilowatts and 420 newton meters. That's all matched to a 6-speed manual transmission as well as full-time 50/50 all-wheel drive. All right, on the road in the Spec B. Now, before we get to the engine and what it's like in practice, let's talk about what has changed for this car, which is starting first up with the brakes. Now, 6-piston Brembos, as I said, quite a firm pedal, but still quite progressive. It's quite easy to modulate. It's not grabby like some Volkswagen Group performance cars can be. And yeah, even on a long sort of country road drive, really pushing the car hard, they don't really start smelling or starting to fade like the regular brakes on the standard WRX can do. Now, a bit more on that 6-speed manual gearbox. It's unchanged from other variants in the WRX range. It's pretty good. Look, it's not the last word in precision or shift feel. Better say something like a Civic Type R, which is sort of the benchmark in this class, but it is pretty good. Doesn't take away from the drive experience too much. It's a bit plasticky in its feel and the way the sort of shifter behaves, but it's okay. It's not too bad and definitely has sort of the notchy feeling you generally expect from a performance-oriented car. Probably the biggest change for the car, though, is the suspension. Now, we'll get onto the daily grind in a moment, but on a twisty road here, I'm going to stick it into Sport Plus on the screen, and just firm up the dampers a little bit, but it's not too firm to live with by any stretch. Still has a fair bit of compliance in it. It sort of takes undulations quite nicely and doesn't feel jittery or firm as a lot of performance cars in this class can feel. The other big change has come in the wheel arches. Now, obviously, a bigger wheel means a new tyre. Bridgestone pretends that S007s, it's a really, really sticky compound, and it performs well with the way this car works as a whole. Unflappable in the dry, and it's actually still in the wet pretty grippy too. Obviously it will understeer, it will wash wide, and will eventually run out of grip, but you can actually push the car surprisingly hard before you hit its limits. It's quite good and quite impressive in that regard. It really gives you that confidence to push on where, say, a front-wheel drive car may start to run into issues. And yeah, you can go a lot faster in this car in inclement weather conditions than you might otherwise expect. Of course, it's not an STI, you don't get that cool trick center differential, and you don't get any sort of limited slip diffs on the front or the rear like a GR Corolla, for example. But it does a pretty good job of putting its power to the road. There's not too much slip, there's not too much in the way of sort of understeer unless you're really driving it hard. And yeah, pretty impressed with the way it performs, the way it sticks on in bends. Now the drive modes you get with this TS variant do give you the option to change the weight of the steering. I've got it right now in my individual mode in normal setting, which I find is probably the best balance for a mix of conditions. Comfort mode is really nice around town, but it's a little bit too effortless and artificial, perhaps, for my tastes. And sport mode obviously gives you the sort of reassuring weight you want when you're pushing this car hard on a country road. Now, I wouldn't say any of these modes are the last word in road feel, for example, but steering is pretty direct, pretty linear, and yeah, not too much to complain about in that regard in terms of it does what you want and it sort of goes where you point it. It's quite a quick rack as well. Coming to this corner now, power out, car puts its power down well, and yeah, this is a really easy car to drive fast and quite a compliant car to drive fast as well. As I said, it's not bone jarring, it's not too stiff, easy to live with, and yeah, just a pleasure to drive on a nice winding road. Is it necessarily the last word in fun, like say an i30N? Is it as playful as like a Golf R or a GR Corolla? I don't think so, but it does a pretty good job of just being a safe, secure handling tool, I suppose, that just gets you from point A to point B on a nice road really quickly. Now we've left the country road behind and we're now on a suburban road, and it's here we can really feel the improvements in that suspension. A lot more compliant, much nicer over speed bumps. It's a big step up over cheaper models in the range that don't get this adaptive damper functionality and just sit on passive dampers, which are tolerable but a little bit too firm, a bit too brittle at times for my liking in particular. Other things worth calling out in this car, visibility is pretty good, even at the back with that tall rear spoiler back there. And there is a fair amount of road noise in this car, particularly on the freeway at 110. Even in sixth, it's still doing sort of 2,500 RPM because those gears are quite short. Combined with a bit of tyre noise as well, a fair bit of tyre noise actually from those Bridgestones. You do have to turn the stereo up quite loud to sort of overcome some of those things, but I suppose it's just a compromise you have to make with a performance car like this. Now, also worth calling out fuel consumption. Now obviously this isn't trying to be a super efficient car, but we've been averaging about sort of the low to mid 12 litres per 100 kilometre range over our time with this car. It was close to 14 in the city, even 15 at times. Again, this is not a particularly frugal car, even for performance car standards. The claim is about 10.5, so it's not too far from that, but just worth budgeting that in, I suppose, if you're buying a WRX in 2025. When this generation of WRX came out a few years ago, we said it was a more grown up and more mature proposition than the car it replaced. I think that was the case in some models, but things like the cheaper manual in the range felt a little bit too firm, a bit too brittle, a bit rough around the edges for what this car really needed to be. I think this model here, finally pairing the manual with the adaptive dampers and some of the other hardware upgrades it gets, is finally the polished performance package it needed to be to take on the heavyweights in this segment. So, what do we think of this new TS Spec B? Well, I reckon the WRX has finally gone to finishing school, at least in terms of this generation, and it's probably the car it should have been from the start. It now rides and handles really well. Great grippy Bridgestone tyres, great stopping power from the Brembo brakes as well, and it's finally got the comfort around town that it needs to compete with the heavyweights in this segment, Golf R in particular. It looks awesome with that new SCI style wing on the back, and the interior is pretty roomy and pretty spacious for what you get. But there are some weaknesses that are worth keeping in mind. The interior is good, but it's not great, especially on the technology front. It is starting to fall behind with that quite laggy touchscreen. There are some missing features at this price, things like a wireless phone charger, are a bit of a sore omission, getting close to 70 grand drive away, and probably the biggest problem dynamically is the power from that engine. 200 kilowatts is still plenty to excite you on the road, but it's not quite up to the Golf R levels or GR Corolla. Really some of the big names in this segment now pushing close to 250 kilowatts. It just feels a little bit undergunned in that respect, especially given how good this car is when you're in a corner and not on the power. But on the whole, if you can live with some of those weaknesses and perhaps treat them as the car's character, this is a really fun car to drive and live with. And if you've driven a WRX previously in this generation but weren't sold, take the new TS Spec B for a drive because it could change your mind.